Welcome to the third in our three-part webinar series on engaging the new college learner. Our first webinar looked at ways to help solidify student enrollment for the fall semester. Our second focused on two key strategies for increasing enrollment over the medium range by creating dynamic partnerships with high schools in your region and by reframing your general education curriculum from distribution requirements to a coordinated series of seminars that help students acquire essential skills even as they experience the power of the liberal arts to build their lives. All three webinars are available on our website. Today, we look further to a revitalized 21st century liberal arts college that can bring the benefits of liberal education to new populations of students while serving as a beacon of reason, fairness, equity, and democracy to a nation struggling under threats of factional chaos and authoritarian rule. We know that you are still confronting the many challenges of this pandemic and are again so grateful to you for spending this time with us today. Our goals today are to offer inspiration and guidance on how small liberal arts colleges can thrive despite today's threats, and to consider new degree options that engage diverse students as partners in learning. I'm Rob Freed, Director of the New American Baccalaureate, together with my colleagues Eli Kramer, who heads our research, and Mary Lynn, our Chief Strategist. Our special guests today are Lori Verlotta, President of Hiram College, and Tom Manley, President of Antioch College in Yellow Springs, whose visions of liberal arts we think will have much in common with our project. The threat to small liberal arts colleges has never been greater. While the immediate attention of higher education has been focused on the pandemic, the threat to the problem for liberal arts colleges is especially acute in the humanities, where the data reveal that only 5% of today's undergraduate degrees are in the humanities, compared with 20% a half century ago. And yet, as we mentioned in our last webinar, our best local and regional employers, large and small, seek college grads who combine essential skills and organizational experience with broad perspective that allows them to be creative innovators and collaborative problem solvers. So while the pundits are predicting the imminent demise of anywhere from a third to a half of our small colleges, we firmly believe this need not happen, but only if we embrace significant reforms that will enhance our mission and affirm our values as we attract a broader spectrum of students. We're also glad to work with you if you are not interested right now in looking at the larger, longer range issue of a baccalaureate, in helping you on some of the early steps that build a foundation for the kinds of restructuring that colleges like Hiram and Antioch are already undertaking. And we will see about that in a few moments. COVID-19 has only brought into sharper focus a crisis long in the making. There are fewer qualified students applying to our colleges. Fear of amassing college debt is rampant, and the cost-benefit analysis of a liberal arts education is being questioned by parents, even as the research shows that it affirms its values. While educational leaders are focused on STEM, our society is in dire need of young people who can lead us toward a more humane and sustainable world. And we cannot look to mega universities or for-profit institutions or online academies to get us there. Young people need to experience the personal interaction with teachers who help them grow as whole persons. But before we launch into our New American Baccalaureate approach to the future of liberal education, let's hear from our guests today, who've each given these issues much thought and found ways to turn that thought into action. I'd like to introduce now President Tom Manley of Antioch College, and later President Lori Verlotta of Hiram College.
for about almost 25 years, mostly at Pitzer College. And that was a way to actually see a variety of liberal arts colleges in action and in collaboration, in a collaborative space. I then went to a art and design college in Portland, Oregon, where I became president. And I was surprised at how much of a liberal arts approach had been transferred there and was foundational to the studio arts program, which of course is what art and design colleges thrive on. And I learned a great deal too about the applied art. So I just been here for 4 years, and this is a true set, an adventure, you know, and I think college should be an adventure, not a package tour. And so I know that that's a commitment that Antioch makes to every individual student. So since coming here, the college reopened. It's a long, gnarly story. But when the college was closed by Antioch University, it lost its accreditation. So for the first 5 or 6 years of its reopening, it was really focused on regaining, or actually getting, accreditation for the first time. And that was important, but all of the other things that a small college needs to take care of in order to have any chance for survival in this very difficult educational landscape, those things had really been set on default. So things, you know, minor things like, where are we going to get our students, and are they going to pay us anything? You know, how many faculty can we sustain? How do we generate revenue to run the college when we can no longer rely on the kindness of our alumni, which currently still funds 75 to 80% of the college's operations, things like that. And so one of the things that I did as soon as we had accreditation in hand was to launch a strategic, different kind of strategic planning process. I called it design build, because we needed to move very quickly and iterate. And the name for this process was FACT, Framework for Antioch College's Transition. And you might say, transition to what? And the transition is, in fact, to this idea of a new kind of American college. So even the language is resonant with what we're talking about today. So for this new kind of American college, and through this process of participatory design, we began to outline not only what we thought our areas of innovation might be, but also some first principles. And those were related to accepting that knowledge and understanding actually is rooted in a transdisciplinary understanding, and that the power of incorporating significant opportunities for experiential and applied learning into any model was essential, and very much part of an Antioch tradition. That a bedrock commitment had to be made to defending and extending human dignity, even as we sought to be open and a diversity of perspectives, and to the reality that human identity is constantly evolving, and that each human has a right to peacefully explore and realize their own identity. And there's nothing controversial, I'm sure, in that principle, except we wanted to make sure that we understood that the liberal arts, as they developed, were really grounded in that first consideration. And finally, that the purpose and efficacy of the liberal arts for us at least, had to be made clear. The personal questions that they answer, how to learn, how to learn to live and work together with others, how to learn to make things from what we've learned, and finally, how to simply be in a community of one and a community with others, that the liberal arts answers those questions, but that we needed to be very explicit about how we were providing experiences for our students to actually come to their own answers around those questions. And so the idea of applied knowledge, of knowledge plus know-how, has become a very important part of this framework that we're using around the development of a new kind of American college, even so far as to say that we look to be an institution of the applied liberal arts, and that it's our obligation to parents and students and the wider world to demonstrate how the liberal arts actually works in the real world. So it's not a one size fits all. Obviously, Antioch in each case has its own set of core value. Each school would have its own set of core values and provide a foundation. We have identified through this process 3 core values. One is own your education, that idea of every student, each student claiming responsibility, demonstrating accountability to be agents in their lives and through their education, to learn experientially, because that has in our history shown itself to be a most powerful form of pedagogy. And finally, to do something, to have purpose for the knowledge and know-how that you're acquiring. And this goes back to the days of Horace Mann, the first president of Antioch, to act for justice. We've shaped our learning model. This is around self-design and areas of studies rather than siloed disciplines. We've applied opportunities. We have applied opportunities. We've named 5 of them. I won't go into them, but they relate to, maybe we can talk about them later. And that there's a preparation that we are providing. We're readying students for a world of human work through a new program we called Antioch College Works, which gets them both a degree, a formal education, and a resume, a serious resume of work and experience along the way. And then finally, we've been working to address critical challenges that all of us are facing, student access, equity, and inclusion. And we've done that through this year declaring that any Pell eligible student who comes to Antioch will receive a full tuition scholarship. And we've done that by guaranteeing every student that comes to Antioch will have paid work during their study terms. When they're on their work terms, of course, they have paid work in other places in the country. And finally, we focused our very limited resources to support an anti-racist and consent-positive campus culture that is timely, but always a work in progress. And we're increasing vehicles very deliberately and in some cases dramatically around shared governance at the college. So that's
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. I apologize to everyone for our initial glitches, and I think many of you did not hear from Lori Verlotta of Hiram College.
Worth repeating.
But it is worth repeating, particularly the 5 C's and the work that you did with your faculty.
Sure. Again, I'm Lori Verlotta from a small private college, Hiram, in Northeast Ohio. And over the last several years, we have been, we, meaning the entire campus community, faculty, staff, student government, trustees, and of course, my very highly competent senior cabinet, In designing and implementing what we call systemic and pervasive change, we have rebranded the college as the New Liberal Arts, and it's much more than just a name. The New Liberal Arts has several components that are compulsory parts of the essence of our change. Students must engage in a high impact activity. So students must complete an internship, a study abroad trip, or a guided research project that they present for presentation or publication during their undergraduate tenure. We have also, in a matter of only 2 years, changed all of our academic departments into, we put them into 5 different schools. We're a small college. We only have 800 residential students, 200 adult students, so we're very small. But rather than have standalone majors, now we have integrated schools so that students can choose a major that's in an academic structure with other majors like it and have an affinity for a school. We have also implemented something that we call mindful technology. All of our students are equipped with an iPad Pro. Prior to distributing the iPad to students, we loaded up with a bundle of educational apps that we teach students how to use, everything from Notability and different editing apps, different note-taking apps, different 3D modeling apps if they're in the sciences and want to do molecular modeling, etc. So they get this wonderful device that's preloaded with apps that would otherwise cost quite a bit of money. We also make electronic textbooks available to them. So this mindful technology piece is a part of the New Liberal Arts. However, because we value so much the kinds of face-to-face interactions and the kinds of seminar discussions and flipped classroom pedagogy that Hiram is proud to utilize, we want to make sure that students understand when the use of mobile technology is appropriate, and when as we say, enough is enough, and apples down, where we fold our device, we put it down, we have a conversation, we take a walk out on campus or on our 550 acres of biofield station. So it's this really, I think, healthy approach to technology where it can be used as an educationally purposeful tool, but it shouldn't completely consume who we are as liberal arts learners. So my of our new liberal arts. We also are very proud to have a highly reflective component in the new liberal arts that is called the 5 C's, the letter C. Because students have this wonderful iPad, they are expected to keep an e-portfolio, and at 4 different junctures of their academic career, during their freshman during question, where students are put into a group that talks about what is justice, a pressing question in this week more than perhaps even other weeks in our recent past. What does it mean to be a healthy and happy human? What is beauty? So the kinds of enduring questions that a liberal arts education is meant to prompt and to have students respond to. We use the freshman seminar to introduce the question and to talk about why these kinds of questions require the weight of different disciplines to help to create a full response. We then use the core curriculum over the course of the next 3 years to have students address an urgent challenge. So the other part of the new liberal arts is the combination of enduring questions and urgent challenges. So in their capstone course, they might be looking at how do 21st century global citizens address global warming?
Right.
What does immigration mean in a global society? How does human trafficking of the 21st century differ from the 18th century? So these are really interesting questions that we start with enduring questions. We have them take their core curriculum, and then we end with an urgent challenge. As they answer these questions, they're looking at it through the lens of the 5 C's. Character, what kind of person do I want to be? Curriculum, what do I want to study and why? Career and calling, what's the difference between a career and a calling? And community, what communities do I want to actively participate in? and what does it mean to pay back and give forward to a community. So life isn't just about ourselves, but about the people that we live ideally in peace with. But those are the 5 C's that they address at each of those 4 junctures. So in a nutshell, those are the changes that we've made in 2 years primarily. And we've changed the curriculum, we've changed, again, the technology, and we've changed the tuition model as well.
So we have 2 examples of really substantive change. And I want to go back very briefly and say that we, the New American Baccalaureate, are ready to work with colleges. We have 10 colleges that are signed on to this webinar today. At whatever stage you are, with beginning steps or more substantive steps, because our goal is to bring the benefits of liberal education to new populations of students while we continue to serve as beacons of reason, of fairness, of equity and democracy in a nation that is struggling under threats of factional chaos and authoritarian rule. What we believe that the future of liberal education, as has been expressed by our guests, lies in a voluntary, well-designed, and carefully staged evolution from an instructional delivery model to one of student empowerment. And we've heard elements of how to empower students, but that's the key. Our traditions are in delivery of instruction. Our future lies in student empowerment. But well, what does this mean? It means meeting students, and again, you have talked about this. It means meeting students where they are, listening to them, learning from them as they practice expressing their viewpoints in a college environment. It means connecting what we teach with how they experience their lives. It means adopting Socratic approaches to classical questions so that students become comfortable discussing the great issues of our time and of all times. It means relating our seminars and our curriculum courses to each other via interdisciplinary themes that connect knowledge instead of sequestering it in departmental silos. And again, that echoes what our guests have talked about. It means assessing student learning authentically as they apply what they have learned to real situations, as opposed to cramming for final exams. It means integrating classroom learning with internship learning, again, something our guests have mentioned, throughout the undergraduate years, not waiting till they're seniors to do this, but just as we said last time, you know, medical students are brought into hospitals in their first semester of medical school, to start thinking about that of our undergraduates as well. And it means student examples of this that are co-designed with faculty and that will be welcomed by employers and graduate schools alike. So we truly believe that this evolution can take place, existing academic programs to students who are happy with them and continue to allow faculty to teach courses that they love. We are not, your college may choose to do the kind of major restructuring that we've seen Antioch do because they started basically after they, but we think this new approach to liberal education can reside side by side with current programs, especially in the transitional period. But it invites us to experiment with an alternative baccalaureate that is designed for the new college learner and taught by instructors who are eager to collaborate in a student-centered environment. So we have, Hiram has its 5 C's, we have 5 elements. we think are essential. Affordability. We are with the promise of good career options upon graduation based on the attainment of skills along with broad knowledge. Engagement, students connecting what they learn with the challenges they face at home and in the world. And this has also been expressed by our guest. Community, students feeling part of a community of who help each other succeed, and by doing so, make themselves that much more valuable to prospective employers. And personalization, students co-designing their own majors with faculty or bringing a sense of individuality to existing majors. This baccalaureate cannot be imposed. It must be co-created on each campus, as we have seen at Hiram and Antioch, in dialogue with stakeholders, with students, with faculty, with alumni, with trustees, with community leaders and key employers. So here are some of the understandings that we think are essential to this co-creative process. We think that the survival and success of your college may well depend on attracting and nurturing clusters of new learners whose needs may be different from the typical college freshman of the past. We think that our essential elements of affordability, engagement, community, perspective, and personalization will strengthen rather than dilute the key tenets of a liberal education. We believe that faculty can expect a higher level of student engagement in all courses and stronger candidates for existing as well as self-designed major from empowered students. And that although some departmental faculty may initially be uncomfortable with these changes, we have experienced colleagues and who can work with them, listen to their concerns, respect their expertise, and affirm the voluntary nature of this work. So we think that each college needs to consider how a blend of current faculty, recently retired faculty who are still eager to teach, recent grads who may want to spend a year teaching with some of their mentors, and new hires can work together as a cadre, an instructional cadre. We need to consider partnerships with regional employers, and we need to look to early indicators of success. Some of these programs that we have heard about and that we are talking about may take a couple of years to develop. But here's what you can look to in the early stages, and I'd love to hear from Tom and Lori about this. Happier students, students who are eager to bring their friends and siblings into the college, and students who feel that they can talk to faculty instead of feeling intimidated or isolated. I think one of the things that we can look to is colleges coming together as national leaders in revitalizing the liberal arts. So let's bring our guests in and our participants in, again with apologies for our shaky start. But Lori and Tom, are there some immediate things you want to add to what we've just talked about?
There was a question regarding how we got the faculty involved in the changes at Hiram. So I think I'll take that and I'll turn it over to Tom.
Okay.
Implementing systemic change at any institution, particularly a 170-year-old liberal arts one, is no easy feat. So one of the things that we did is to meet with the resistors first. That's really my strategy, that when we started to think about what are some of the changes we want to put in place, who are some of the folks with whom we might be in tension with, before we got too far down the floating the idea, the trial balloon, so to speak, my style is always to bring the resistors in first, because you can often learn a lot about what they're worried about, what they might be afraid to hear. There's a lot to learn if we can go in with a steady head and an open mind and heart to listen. And then I had 100 meetings on the semester before we implemented the curricular changes. I met with 100 different groups of people. Sometimes at the president's house over cappuccino and coffee. I'm a good Italian girl. Sometimes during 6-mile walks at the field station with the field biologists that never like to sit at a desk. So meeting people where they are, literally, emotional perspective, in their own space. I had 100 of those meetings, and the vice president of student affairs worked with the student government. The vice president of development worked with alumni. The chief academic officer worked, tirelessly with the faculty, on and on. So this coordinated approach of face-to-face meetings, listening, and reminding people, I will listen. I might not always agree. So this notion of being heard doesn't mean that ultimately we're going to do exactly what you say. But as tense as it was, in the end, very few people, maybe 1 or 2 people said we didn't engage or we didn't listen. But that level of really bringing people into the fold when it's hard is probably the single most important, nugget I have. And everybody talks about inclusivity, but making it happen. I mean, all again,
Tom, now
I think I would do it that way.
were you able to hire faculty particularly designed or brought together around your ideas, or did you also need to spend time talking with people who were skeptical?
So great question. I think it's always a skepticism as opposed to cynicism is a really good quality, and as long as it has a flip side of a willingness to actually be open to what we don't yet understand or know. So there was, in this process of co-designing, but you can call it co-creation, a lot of that, I think, of people stepping in as far as they want to go, and and it's ongoing. I would say that the faculty at Antioch that were in place really were asked to undertake a major redesign of the curriculum to move from a more traditional discipline-based set of majors to all self-design. It wasn't a given that it would go to all self-design, but that was the question given our size, and we still are trying to find our sweet spot recruitment-wise at college. So in 1 year, the faculty was moved from these big questions about redesigning our calendar and redesigning our approach around majors. And within that year, not only completed the redesign, we submitted it very quickly to our accreditation bodies and had it approved within 14 months or 15. I mean, that it's just unheard of. No place that I've been at has had a more heroic effort by the faculty to undertake work in such a way. And sure, I think there was a process of internal persuasion and development within the faculty to find a consensus around at least the new
Right.
self-designed
I
curriculum.
love the phrase heroic work. I think these are the times that require heroic work, and heroic work can sometimes take small steps. But the goal, which is meeting these students where they are, and then finding ways to attract new groups of students who have been traditionally excluded from liberal arts colleges because they seem too expensive or too exclusive or whatever. We're all about that, and we would love to hear more about the questions that arise from you. But Mary, you have been collecting questions or comments from our guests. Do you have some that you want to share?
Lori and Tom, am I? Yeah, I'm unmuted. Lori and Tom have done a great job of dealing with the questions that has come in. My enduring question that keeps coming up over and over again in my work as somebody who was liberally arts educated in the liberal arts and then went out into the business community is, how do we make the case to students and business communities and parents that you need the multiple perspectival mental development that comes from the liberal arts in the workplace? So Lori or Tom, jump in.
Yeah, I think one of the best ways to make the case for a liberal arts education in the workplace is that, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, students who graduate from college in 2020 and beyond are not only going to change jobs 10 times, but careers 10 times.
10
So,
times.
I mean, imagine 10 career changes, not just 10, position
Yeah.
changes, similar industry. So this notion of, it makes perfect sense, to pick a major that you're passionate about when you're 18, 19, or 20. But unless you have that breadth and depth of the core curriculum and the critical thinking and the kinds of things that we all know as products of the liberal arts, your ability to change and to assume positions that aren't even in the making right now. Not only do we not have titles for them, students will be entering careers that don't even exist, that we don't even have curriculum around. And I think that, as transactional as that might sound, that many people understand that the life of work is changing, careers are changing, and while we might prepare students very wonderfully for their first or second career through the major, it's the liberal arts that prepare students for a life of work and a life of wander for 35, 45 years.
You're reminding me of the articles that have been flooding the the media from various think tanks and analysts, saying that the big tech companies are looking for liberal arts majors. That's who they want to hire now, because engineers aren't necessarily going to be a good manager. The track record of success in leadership and moving up in the organization comes from those who have the personal development and the interpersonal development that comes from the liberal arts.
That, I think, I want to get to Tom here, but I think that reinforces the focus on the first 2 years. I mean, this is not a time to say choose one from group A and one from group B and get your requirements out of the way. This is the time to help students initially take charge of their learning and look at issues like 10 career changes and say, what do I need to prepare within myself to be able to do that? Tom, do you want to say something about that?
Oh, I just want to remind participants that please put your questions in the Q&A panel, and we'll get to them as soon as they come in.
Yeah, I do. I want to go back to this idea of how the liberal arts are applied, because to Lori's point, that's not immediately apparent when in our catalogs necessarily, when we have stories about individual students doing that. But her point that this is these are experiences, skills, knowledge, and know-how that you take with you. right? And that you have resource to. It's a repertoire that keeps growing. If we've done our jobs well, you keep growing it, right, over your lifetime. It's not like a one-use application. And I think it's important to define some of those qualities and skills a little bit beyond things like, well, critical thinking, for example.
Right.
We resort to a pat set of answers sometimes, I think, when parents and students ask us, well, why should I really care about the liberal arts? And a lot of parents that I've talked to over time, you think the liberal arts is a hard sell, you ought to try art school. But anyway,
I know that one well.
Many of the parents would say, well, in the first place, I'm not sure that I ascribe to being a liberal. Secondly, again, why would I want my kid to study the arts?
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Like, so we haven't formally identified. We talk about areas of practice at Antioch and the ability to extend formal learning that are value rich, but also allow students to begin to build that kind of resume, life's resume. And so this idea again of taking responsibility for your destiny.
Mm-hmm.
That's an awareness skill. These are called, I think, awareness skills.
Right.
Embracing possibilities that arise today. Not something that was set for you, when you were 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And this very much to this point that Lori was making about the rapidly changing world of work, right?
Right.
Right. It's not like a career, about one career or even 5 careers anymore. And I emphasize human work. It's the highly human work that we're preparing for, because a lot of the work that we used to prepare for is no longer going to be there.
Right.
It's being done by AI. Being open and alert to new situations, having a confident and flexible response to the whole idea of change. And then finally, and I think this is really important, going back to what employers say they want. They often, that's a mixed bag. And by the way, it's a real mixed bag. They say what they want, but when you ask whether they're getting it or not, they also say they're not getting it, like 85% of the time. You ask our deans and provosts if we're providing it, and 95% of the time we say yes. There's a disconnect there. Last thing is really about problem solving, finding solutions are particularly complex and wicked, right? That's what our students do best, I think.
It
We
means...
have Rob, we have another question here, and just for the sake of time, I'm wondering if we can get to it. I'll just read it from David Steelman. If the innovative efforts like those at Hiram and Antioch are heroic, extent is it possible to develop a network among colleges involved in innovative efforts to A, learn from one another's successes and failures, B, provide institutional support to one another, and C, help students who may choose a college whose brilliant innovations nonetheless succumb to financial difficulties? So, Lori, do you want to grab that one?
Sure, I'll start. And I think that
Tom probably has a lot to say too.
No.
I'll be quick. College coalitions are going to become more important than ever.
Absolutely.
So many of us were on despite the wonderful changes that we've made at Hiram, I will tell you that we are not out of the woods yet. We were beginning to see that light at the end of the tunnel. And in my ongoing straight talk self way, I will tell you that we're worried. Anyone who's not worried about what the realities of COVID mean for not only 2020, but from 2020 to 2025 is probably a bit delusional. So college coalition building is key. We need to be more cooperative than competitive. It's hard to do in a highly saturated market like the one in Ohio, frankly. Both of us are from Ohio schools. But there's a lot to be learned when college presidents and college leadership teams and trustees and faculty can come together, share the story, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's lots of bumps that we hit along the way, and helping others try to navigate some of the bumps so that their road is a little more smooth is something that we can and should do for each other. And these kinds of webinars where we're allowed to tell our story is a small but necessary step in terms of informal coalition building.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
We're hearing that from other folks, even some who aren't here, that other small colleges, that they see various consortia being absolutely crucial moving forward. And I, as somebody who, again, was in the liberal arts and then moved into business and has gone back and forth to colleges, I think that consortia that really understand marketing and research, how to really identify student, parent, and business needs, and to create the loop of that conversation is really, really, really crucial.
I think the consortia of the future will realize that we are not in competition with each other for a small and shrinking number of students. We need each other so that we can develop strategies to bring a lot more students into the liberal arts.
Yeah.
Even students whose parents shrink at the word liberal. We need to think about that. We need to help students early in their high school understand some of the very themes that, Tom, you were talking about of self-identification and self-direction and so forth, things that they have not necessarily experienced in high school. And so the part of our approach is to work with you to design ways to get into the high schools and meet students who would not normally see your colleges as a goal, and help them realize that they too can experience the liberating and emancipating and mind enlarging experiences of liberal arts. And that's true, by the way, for honor students as well, whose parents are all focused on getting those high GPAs and those high SAT scores, and they may lose their education in the process.
Can I go back to one of the components of the question that was asked by Steelman, if that was right? And that's the financial dimension of this. And I think you could leave this conversation and realize that there are incredibly innovative things happening at colleges like Hiram and Antioch, and like many other campuses are really working diligently to evolve the pedagogical model and better serve our students. But the financial model on which all of this rests, we keep talking about innovating that as well. And what I think, and we haven't, we're in the same ruts in terms of where we expect to get the revenue from. I think those that colleges that don't have big endowments, and even some that do, are still putting incredible burdens on families and students to borrow money to pay for education that in most other countries in the world would have some support from the government. There's the value that our young people are creating, but it's weighed against this incredible burden of debt. So I would say that one thing that has to happen, and that's not happening, is that we need to innovate a financial model. And I think that can especially go around this idea of network, coalition.
Absolutely.
Right. We're working on that at NAB. We haven't heard from Eli. Eli, do you want to talk about the research shows about the potential and what our internal research is showing about the potential for the low-cost model?
Yeah, and just a little bit to touch on what Tom was saying. I apologize if my connection gives out. Just let me know if it pauses. The rest of
Yeah,
my
yeah, we know
panelists.
you're in an
He's
exclusive
up in the woods
forest
in the
cabin in
mountains of
Poland.
Poland.
Good. So speaking from Poland in the woods, I'll give you some thoughts here. First is, I think what Tom was speaking about is definitely on our minds in the NAB, that there really has to be a systemic transition to a different kind of model for liberal arts colleges. One, anchored in local communities, and that builds off of that. In addition, I think we already know from the research that many coalitions have historically struggled in higher education because they've tried to build around a more society model where it's sharing resources, presenting panels, and ultimately that just doesn't build the kind of contoured experiments that each institution is doing in its own place. So, each institution looks so different. It's hard to get on a panel and imagine that's just going to build the energy towards systemic change in really different environments. So I think one of the things we're looking at in the NAB is a model that really is mutually supporting different experiments in different contexts with a kind of overall commitment to building them as anchor institutions in their regional areas. And I think the research attests that the more you can contextualize a program to that context and local area, the more chance there is for something that will look systemically different from the kind of old international elite tuition-driven high-end liberal arts model that may no longer be the kind of future of where we're headed. So and I think the research backs this up, that those students are simply not going to the same, are not going to go fly across the country and go to the same kinds of institutions the way they used to. And especially now in the COVID environment,
yeah,
where everyone wants to be local or close to parents and otherwise.
Yeah.
So I think just to repeat on a kind of research vision, we want a coalition that's doing its own experiments and helping each other do that in their kind of anchored context. And I haven't touched too much on the particular research, but if you're interested about what we're thinking about that suggests this, I'm happy to point you to it, like Arts and Sciences LLC, McGuire.
Future webinars.
Yeah, future webinars. Please talk to me.
This points to what Tom was saying about the fact that when you ask the businesses, are the colleges delivering? And you ask the colleges, are they delivering? You're getting two different answers. There's what we're thinking of as sort of orphaned research that can only probably be done by a nonprofit that is willing to do it, even though there's not going to be a lot of, money in available, coming in from selling it, but it's going to be incredibly useful to the small colleges, looking at local business and college relationships. And that's something that we think is really important for individual colleges to get into and for a coalition to get behind.
I'm going to say something here that may be especially controversial. I think we need to look at the effective model of employing teachers who are focused primarily or exclusively on empowering students in the undergraduate program. We do that haphazardly through adjuncts and graduate assistants and others. We need to do it systemically. We need to find a new series of roles for teachers who want to teach students more than they want to impress colleagues nationally in their disciplines. And I think we can create a model, an economic model that makes tuition affordable, particularly if that tuition leads to a job that will repay modest loans quickly. We cannot simply assume that the tuition burden and will carry on for students for year after year after year. We've got to create, and we are working very hard to create a model of a tuition that would be affordable and would actually allow colleges to sustain themselves financially. We think it can be done.
Just real quick to just affirm what Rob was saying about faculty. I just interviewed for the NAB Henry Reichman from the AAUP, who has his new book on academic freedom. It's probably the largest voice defending tenure. But he's always the first to say that the historical mission of tenure was twofold: to have due process rights for a position and job security. It's not like the contracts that exist today are beholden to really what tenure was even meant to do in the first place. So I think if you even listen to the leading voices advocating systemic, dignified work in higher education, they'll also say the first to say is we shouldn't think narrowly about what contracts ought to be, and especially ones that focus on what small slacks do best, which is this teaching commitment and engagement with student-centered learning.
So we have a comment on the consortium idea that has come in from Greg Prince. I posted it in the chat. He's, for some reason, was not able to, he wasn't able to communicate other than through this. But he says he would like to urge those listening and the guests to consider forming formal consortia. I think he means sooner rather than later in the context, and seek grants to test and refine new financial and academic models. So would Lori or Tom like to respond to that?
I know that my leadership team and I are interested in looking more looking at structures such as this. So if that's something that members of this group want to consider, I can say that we would be very interested in looking at, as I said, more formal structures for collaboration. So, you know, definitely would like to talk more about that.
And Lori, I see that you have to go. Your participation has been so exciting, and we definitely want to continue this conversation with you. Thank you so much, and we can direct further questions to Rob and Eli and Tom.
Great. I'll say one more thing on my way out, since we're talking about financials. We do have a brand new tuition model called Learn More, Earn More, Spend Less. So if participants want to have a concrete model of how a liberal arts campus has started to really change the high cost, high discount model, they can just Google Hiram College, Learn More, Earn More, Spend Less. But it's a pretty innovative model that includes a 35% reduction in sticker price and free classes and paid internships. So getting to, I'll leave with that, but it's a concrete model of at least one way to look at affordability issues. Great. It's been a real pleasure talking to all of you today. I hope that we can stay
so much, Lori.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
To be continued. You know, so much of what Lori just said reinforces the idea that an empowered student is capable of so much more than we have given students credit for in the past. That an empowered student can earn money, can start businesses, can find ways of working, of bringing internships together with college courses and seminars that will reduce expenses, even as it will reinforce career skills. Tom, do you want to have the last word on this?
Well, I agree with everything that you just said, Rob, and as to the idea that Greg raised about trying things, I think we need to start taking more of a laboratory approach.
Yes.
As we look at our institutions and the spaces inside of our institutions and the spaces between our institutions and others, and especially to a point that Eli was making before, how we occupy our communities and vice versa. So there are ways of evolving these models, not just around the sort of unitary 501c3 or nonprofit or for-profit corporation. There are ways that I think we need to begin to see how institutions blend and mix and help complete one another. So Antioch is very much built in that mode of laboratory.
Our democratic leaders, our leaders in promoting democracy, are re-emphasizing the importance of working locally. And our colleges need to do that too. We need to look at the communities around the college and say, what can we do that, that reinforces the best of these communities, that combine business and civic and nonprofit groups, and build those into our educational picture. It will help our enrollment tremendously, even as it will stimulate contributions and support from institutions and groups that have been caught in the town gown conflict in the past. I think we need to break that down and work locally in a way that colleges that have been focused on national and international have often failed to do.
I think
Do we have any more questions?
Yeah, we should do maybe one more question, and then we should wrap up just to be mindful of time. I also want to note for those of you, because of the technical difficulties, that didn't see the first part of our talk today, I'm happy to give you the slides. You see Rob's email below. We can give you the PowerPoint itself. So if you want to see just what we previously said, we're happy to do that.
Well, it looks like Jennifer Schubert, who's submitted many wonderful questions in this webinar, asked a question a while back that we may have sort of answered about how colleges are going to be making the case. And I think that we've talked about how that part of what we need to do is creating the consortia, but I, as somebody who has focused in marketing and trying to help visionary organizations make the case, we need to be so much better at interacting with the greater world and with the marketplace. Too many of us in academia are kind of essentially thoughtful and perhaps more introverted than is useful when it comes to making this case. And I would like to see more of us individually and in consortia developing simply better marketing and communication skills and developing relationships with the media and making sure that we are taking opportunities to be on talk shows and writing opinion pieces for the New York Times or the Atlantic or whoever it is that we think is appropriate. We need to be more confident about telling our story and making our case.
And nobody can do that better than our students.
That's right. The students are the story. The students are always the story.
Well, we just want to thank you again, all of you, for participating, and let you know that with this third webinar, we've come to the end of this series, and what we are going to be focused on is meeting with you, talking with you, and actually planning with you how we can work together to achieve those goals that you have articulated and that we all believe in. So thank everyone. Thank you, Tom, and thanks to Garrett Luima, who helped set this up, and to Anita and,
yes.
and everyone else. And thank you to our board members and friends who have participated in these technically complicated but ideologically meaningful conversations.
And timely. I mean, this is the conversation of the time for the liberal arts. This is it. And in fact, perhaps for education. The as one recent article described it, the elite cyborg mega universities aren't going away, and we need to make sure that the liberal arts don't either.
Great. Thank you, Tom. I hope we get to talk more soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. Pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, Tom.
Thanks for your good work.
For everyone attending.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye now.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. So I apologize.
Are we going to wait a minute? Are we going to continue recording, and we're going to tell our participants that they can stay for the debrief if they want? We still have 8 participants. And Gary says thank you back to us. And Greg Prince says, Mary Lynn is right about marketing. I know I'm right about marketing.
Okay.
So
Yeah, is there any other final thought for kind of post-talk before I end the recording and let everyone else off?
I think we can end the recording, and
Okay.
we will hear from people if we
anyone
haven't heard
wants to
from
help
you.
with our debrief, feel free.
Yeah.